Hi, I'm Robin.
And I'm Chris. Together we're the Gen X couple.
Hey guys.
Take one. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back. We are so glad you are here wasting some time with us. Today's episode is one of my favorites because it's actually about a real person whose life feels like a blend of history, circus spectacle, and true celebrity. So this was an age long before movies, TV, or social media even existed. We're talking about General Tom Thumb, who was born Charles Sherwood Stratton, and he was a performer who became one of the most famous entertainers in the world during the 19th century. His story touches on childhood curiosity, international stardom, huge weddings, celebrity marriages, and even royal audiences.
Yeah, it's wild to think about someone who lived more than 150 years ago, long before electrical lights or radio became that famous. Like the whole world knew his name. And most people today only vaguely recognize the name Tom Thumb without realizing he was a real person with the real experiences, not just a fairy tale character. So we're going to unpack his life, his performances, his marriage, and the world he lived in.
Yeah, and he's actually from the area. He's from southeastern Massachusetts. Well, not from. He lived here in southeastern Massachusetts. And actually, my dad used to be friends with a guy who was like his great-grandson. He used to work with him when my dad worked at the VA. I forget his real first name. Actually, I forget his name. We just called him the Thumb. That just came to me right now. I forgot all about it. But my dad would be like, oh, I'm going out with blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, oh, me, Tara, Brian, my sister, brother, and my mom. Like, oh, the Thumb? We just called him the Thumb. Anyway, I don't know why that just popped into my head, but I guess mostly because he's from this area and he still has family in this area. And to set the stage about Tom Thumb, I just want to tell you guys that this was an era before Hollywood, before recorded sound even, before television. People got famous by performing live on stages in places like circuses and at museums and, through word of mouth. So for someone like Tom Thumb to become a global sensation at that time, especially as a child when he first started, it's truly remarkable. So, Charles Sherwood Stratton was born on January 4th, 1839 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to parents of average height. Early on, everything about his growth was normal until around 6 months of age, when he simply stopped growing. By the time he was a toddler, he was only about 25 inches tall, and he weighed roughly 15 pounds. He was tiny, but perfectly proportioned otherwise.
So this is important. Charles wasn't born with a debilitating illness or deformity. He was simply unusual short in stature. His body developed normally, just on a smaller scale. And this naturally intrigued people with the time when scientific explanations for physical differences were rudimentary, but also meant they looked physically striking without appearing unnatural, which the showmen of the era saw as a draw for audiences.
Exactly. And, keep in mind that this was the mid-19th century, a period when public exhibitions, museums of curiosities, traveling circuses, and theatrical exhibitions were incredibly popular. People lined up for hours to see spectacular feats, strange animals, exotic performers from abroad, and remarkable human beings whose physical characteristics were outside of the norm.
So here's this tiny kid in Bridgeport living a normal life until he caught the attention of a man who knew exactly what to do with him. Enter P.T. Barnum.
Yeah. Not my favorite person in history. I feel like he exploited people. But anyway, P.T. Barnum was already a name in show business by that point, and he was always chasing the next big draw that would pull in crowds. In 1842, Barnum heard about Charles and brought him to New York. Barnum was always masterful at crafting a persona, and he gave Charles the stage name of General Tom Thumb, borrowing from the famous English folk character.
Yeah, and Barnum did something interesting. He exaggerated the storytelling around Charles to create
Mystique.
Mystique.
You should know that from the X-Men.
Even though Charles was about 4 years old when Barnum began exhibiting him, Barnum billed him as an 11-year-old dwarf. It's one of the earliest examples of spin in show business, decades before the term even existed.
Yeah, spin or exploit. But Barnum didn't just present him as a curiosity, he trained him. Charles was taught to sing, dance, mimic famous people, and perform comedic impersonations. He became more than an exhibit. He became a performer with stage presence, timing, and personality.
Yeah. There's an important point that a lot of people think that Barnum was exploitive,
Yep.
and in many ways he certainly did capitalize on Charles' stature. But Charles himself had real talent, and once he learned the art of performance, he shined. He wasn't a passive object on display. He was commanding audiences, eliciting laughs, applause, and general admiration.
Admiration?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I got messed up because you messed me up. But yeah, Barnum was exploitive. But anyway, Tom Thumb, or Charles, he was tiny, but he was very charismatic as a person. And that combo was irresistible to audiences. Barnum always said that good performers weren't just seen, they were remembered. And that's actually true. Charles definitely fit that bill.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's me. Sorry. Sorry. We're going back and forth on our notes. Within months of his New York debut, General Tom Thumb was headlining performances at Barnum's American Museum. But Barnum wanted more, of course. Side note. And in 1844, he took Charles to Europe. And that was huge. It wasn't just touring the next state over. It was actually crossing the Atlantic. And that was a time when international travel was expensive, difficult, and rare for most people.
Yeah, and the Europeans were captivated. In London, he performed before Queen Victoria herself. The British monarchy, especially Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, were entranced by his performances, and the publicity was enormous. Entire newspapers wrote about him, and spectators couldn't get enough.
One British newspaper famously said, "Tom Thumb is all the fashion," and that ladies were kissing him on the cheek everywhere he went. And think about that. This tiny American performer was literally a cultural sensation on the other side of the world.
And in France, he was performing in huge halls packed with hundreds of people. There were accounts of long lines around theaters, crowds spilling out into the streets just to catch a glimpse of him. This was before cinema, before radio, and before television. Live performance was the medium of mass culture, and Tom Thumb was one of its earliest global stars.
Yeah, and it's remarkable that a performer of his age and stature commanded that level of international attention. It says something powerful, really, about his talent, his charisma, and really the way Barnum marketed him, or shall we say exploited.
Yeah, and this just wasn't a sideshow, like freak show. This was entertainment. People walked away not just amazed by his size, but genuinely impressed by his talent.
Yeah, is it my turn?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. So what did his performances look like? Tom Thumb's acts were highly varied. He sang songs, he danced, he performed comedy sketches, he mimicked famous historical figures, and he engaged his audiences with witty banter. He wasn't just a silent spectacle. He had some range, you guys.
Yeah, and he was always sparking laughter, awe, joy, and even admiration. Audiences weren't just curious about how small he was. They were thrilled by what he could do.
I think we're in a different spot. I don't know. I think we're in different spots.
Well, now we're going to talk about the wedding.
Oh, well, I still had another thing, but yeah, go ahead. Okay, so no, I'll start, because I think I have it first. You bumped ahead a section, and that's why I got confused. No, don't shake your head. No, you did. And that's why I lost my spot on my notes. Anyway, we're going to talk about the fairy wedding. By 1863, Charles had matured into a seasoned performer, and he met another star of the Barnum Touring Company, Mercy Lavinia Warren Bump, better known as Lavinia Warren. She was a talented performer in her own right, but she was often billed as the Little Queen of Beauty.
And their wedding, which was on February 10th, 1863, became one of the most widely reported events of the decade. Newspapers across the United States covered what was dubbed the fairy wedding. Reporters wrote about the dresses, decorations, all the guests, and the reception. The wedding was front page news everywhere.
Yeah, and Barnum, ever the promoter, capitalized on it, of course. He sold tickets to the reception for $75 a piece, which was a huge amount of money at the time. And it was reported that thousands of people tried to buy those tickets. The reception was held at the Metropolitan Hotel in New York City, and from atop an enormous piano, the newlyweds greeted visitors in an elaborate costume. That is super cute.
And to top it all off,
that sounds awesome.
President Abraham Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln hosted them at the White House later that same month.
That is pretty cool.
That's right. The President of the United States entertained them in the most esteemed residence in the country. It was a combination of celebrity culture, spectacle, and social fascination that had never been seen before.
Right. And what's fascinating, really, is beyond the circus fluff, their marriage was reported as tender and affectionate. That is the sweetest thing. Many accounts from people who knew them describe a genuine connection. They toured together for years, and they shared in the celebrity and performances.
Yeah, and this just wasn't some gimmick entertainment. People today might dismiss it as a publicity stunt, but in context, these were real cultural events, and people cared about them deeply, just like fans care about movie stars today.
Yeah. Who's the latest? Taylor Swift, and what's that guy she's dating?
Kelsey?
Yeah. Just think of it as Taylor and, what's his first name? Jason?
Yeah.
Is he Jason? Because I know there's a brother.
Travis, maybe.
Travis, yeah. Yeah, think of Taylor Swift and whatever. I forget already. But after their marriage, Tom Thumb and Lavinia didn't even slow down. In fact, they expanded their reach and performed together worldwide. They toured Europe again, returning to cities where Charles had already become beloved. And they performed in royal courts, grand theaters, and carnival tents alike.
Yeah, an audience in places like London, Paris, and even in British India greeted them with open arms. They were so beloved that theaters had to extend bookings. There was newspaper articles. There was fans always sending letters asking for souvenirs. It was a fandom before Instagram or fandom before mass-printed photographs.
Mm-hmm. And the shows themselves evolved too. Their joint acts played up their marriage, their chemistry between them, and their delightful stage presence together. Lavinia had her own range of talents. She could dance, sing, and she had impeccable comedic timing. And together they became a power duo in performance entertainment.
Yeah, and their celebrity status reached beyond the stage. They appeared in caricatures and magazines,
Close enough.
Were featured on merchandise, and even had songs written about them. It's shocking when you think about it. People were collecting souvenir cards and programs featuring their names and images.
Yeah. And with fame came wealth. And Charles and Lavinia used it. They lived in upscale New York neighborhoods, owned property on Connecticut's Thimble Islands, and even had a steam yacht for travel. There was not... This was not a life of poverty or exploitation, although it did start by a guy who's known for that. This was a life of success and comfort.
And their financial relationship with Barnum shifted over time, too. At points, Stratton became something of a business partner with Barnum, even helping him out financially when the showman ran into money troubles. The dynamic wasn't just manager and performer. There was mutual respect and business collaboration.
Yeah. And this speaks volumes, really, about Charles as a person. He wasn't just a performer. He was a savvy entertainer with financial acumen, social awareness, and a deep understanding of how to present himself. That's a level of professionalism we don't often associate with performers of that era.
Yeah, plus the touring the world all over And performing for royalty wasn't just glamorous, it was grueling.
Oh, I bet.
Travel was slow, conditions could be rough, and the physical toll of repeated performances was real. And they succeeded, though, again and again.
And then in 1883, while staying at the Newhall House Hotel in Milwaukee, tragedy struck the city in the form of one of the worst fires ever in that city. The building burned fiercely and it claimed many lives. Charles and Lavinia did manage to escape the fire, but the incident was a stark reminder that life in that era was unpredictable and dangerous.
And not long after that, Stratton suffered a stroke and passed away on July 15, 1883, at the age of 45. Considering how much he experienced in such a relative short life, global fame, performances before royalty, tours across the world, and a high-profile marriage, it's not to be struck by the enormity of his journey.
Yeah, his funeral was very well attended, and he was laid to rest in his hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Newspapers carried obituaries, and fans across the world mourned his passing. For many, it felt like a chapter of entertainment history had come to an end.
But Lavinia Warren's story didn't end there. 2 years after Charles' death, she married Count Primo Maggiore, another performer of small stature. Together, they continued touring internationally, and even creating a traveling troupe of entertainers of all sizes.
I love that you said troupe as troupe. Okay, I'm not going to get the giggles. They also ran a famous roadside stand in Middleborough, Massachusetts, where they would reenact plays and musicals for visitors. It became a local attraction, and people came from far and wide to see their performances and meet them in person. We actually saw a bunch of their stuff.
There's a museum.
Yeah, there's a Middleborough Historical Museum, and we had actually seen a bunch of their stuff. I don't know if I still have pictures of it or not, but maybe I'll share it if I do.
Yeah, and later in life, Lavinia even starred in a silent film called Le Petunia's Courtship.
Yeah, not even close.
Showcasing her theatric chops even into a new medium. That willingness to adapt and continue performing at an older age says a lot about her dedication to the craft.
Yeah, it's Lilliputians. And Lavinia passed away in 1919 at the age of 78, and she was buried beside Charles Stratton. Her gravestone simply reads, "His wife," which is a touching tribute to their lifelong partnership beyond the lights of the stage. So, General Tom Thumb's life intersects so many threads in entertainment history. He helped redefine celebrity culture, bringing live performance to global audiences, and he blurred the line between spectacle and artistry. He showed that an entertainer could be both adored and respected.
Yeah, and the story also highlights how audiences in the 19th century connected emotionally with performers. They didn't have screens or recordings. They had people live on stage, mesmerizing crowds through talent, charisma, and presence. And Tom Thumb was one of the first performers to take that connection global.
Yeah, and some modern performers owe a debt to this legacy, whether they realize it or not. In a world before quote unquote social media influencers, before pop stars, before film icons, Tom Thumb was already a household name, and his relationship with Barnum helped shape how the entertainment would be marketed for decades.
And what's really inspiring is how he embraced who he was. He didn't hide or shy away. He owned his talent, performing with confidence, and he captivated the world.
Yeah, so that wraps up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Charles Sherwood Stratton, or as you guys probably know him better, General Tom Thumb. What a crazy journey from a boy in Connecticut to one of the most famous entertainers in history.
Yeah, thank you all out there for joining us on this historical venture. If you loved the story as much as we did, hit subscribe.
If you hate it, tell people it was somebody else's podcast.
And stay tuned for more episodes that explore fascinating lives behind history's unforgettable figures.
Yeah, I don't know who we're going to do next. If you guys have ideas, you can email me.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
See you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.